Our gospel for this Sunday comes to us from Matthew, the 21st chapter. When Jesus entered the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came to him as he was teaching and said, "By what authority are you doing these things, and who gave you this authority?" Jesus said to them, "I will also ask you one question. If you tell me the answer, then I will also tell you by what authority I do these things. Did the baptism of John come from heaven, or was it of human origin?" And they argued with one another. "If we say from heaven, he will say to us, 'Why then did you not believe him?' But if we say of human origin, we are afraid of the crowd, for all regard John as a prophet." So they answered Jesus, "We do not know." And he said to them, "Neither will I tell you by what authority I am doing these things. What do you think? A man had 2 sons. He went to the first and said, 'Son, go and work in the vineyard today.' He answered, 'I will not.' But later he changed his mind and went. The father went to the second and said the same. And he answered, 'I go, sir.' But he did not go. Which of these 2 did the will of his father?" They said, "The first." Jesus said to them, "Truly I tell you, the tax collectors and the prostitutes are going into the kingdom of heaven ahead of you. For John came to you in the way of righteousness, but you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and the prostitutes believed him. And even after you saw it, you did not change your minds and believe him." This is the gospel of our Lord.
Praise you, Christ.
You may be seated. I'd like to invite Thomas and Ellie forward. Hey, hon. How you guys doing? Okay. Have you been downstairs yet today? You're kind of pulling on my cord there, Thomas. Have you been downstairs yet today? What's it look like in the basement right now? Very dirty. I don't know if it's dirty. It's just kind of messy down there right now, right? And why is that? You're so good at this, Thomas. Because the Hope for Haiti event is staged downstairs, right? Meaning that it's ready to be put out in the parking lot as soon as everybody moves their cars after church. That's something we need to make sure we say. But it's not going to be a mess down there forever, right? And in fact, there's actually some that it looks the way it does, right? It's all put into clumps that can be easily taken outside and put in the right section. So, if you didn't know that we were having a Hope for Haiti thing, you might go downstairs and say, "This church is a mess." But we know better. So sometimes life is like that. Sometimes it just seems like it's a total mess and we don't know what's going on. But after the fact, later on, you might be able to say, "Oh, it all makes sense now. All of that was in preparation for a really good thing to have happen." And so if anyone from this church goes downstairs right now and sees that, that's the message I want them to know. It's okay. It looks like a calamity now. And if your lives look that way, could be the same deal. Okay, you ready to sing our song? You ready to, Ellie? If anybody asks you who I am, who I am, who I am, if anybody asks you who I am, tell them I'm a child of God. Would you join me in prayer? O Lord, may the meditations of my heart and the words of my mouth be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. Amen. The next 3 weeks or so of our Bible readings are going to be talking about the Pharisees. And while they weren't explicitly mentioned in today's reading, they're almost always grouped together with Pharisees, chief priests, and scribes as one unit. And that's because basically the Pharisees had taken over the leadership at this point in time in the land of Israel. And let's say something. We are nothing like the Pharisees. No, sir. Nothing at all. It's not like the center point of our prayer life is this prayer that has a bunch of thys and thines and trespasses and words that none of you ever use in your daily life at all. Nope, that's not us. It's not like we together every single week say a creed that is so ancient that none of us actually even know who it came from, or we can't even tell. We just say, some apostle made this up. Nope. Not like the center point of our worship service together is a sacrament so incredibly confusing that blood and wine and bread and flesh are all mixed up and jumbled up, and if you have to tell one of your friends who doesn't go to church what it is we do, you have to use some weird word like consubstantiation, and they'll say transubstantiation, you'll say, no, not that one, it's the other one. Yeah, so no, we get it. The Pharisees, they just did a bunch of rituals they didn't understand. We get it. Okay, maybe we're a bit like the Pharisees, now that I put that out loud. In fact, that's actually a critique that we get oftentimes. It's this weird critique because evangelical fundamentalists critique us and say, yeah, you guys have all this ritual and stuff that's rote. Why do you have a liturgy? You shouldn't have a liturgy. You should make it up every day, new liturgy, new words, spontaneous. It's got to be like that. And then from the complete opposite end of the spectrum, folks who are in the atheist world pointed at us and they're like, yeah, actually kind of for once I agree with evangelical fundamentalists. You guys are just doing a ritual that you don't understand. And at best it's silly. At worst it hides ignorance and it breeds ignorance. Well, I will say on one hand, I kind of hear that critique and I say, yeah, maybe there's a little truth to the fact that we should spend some time learning our stuff. It's probably not okay if I go up here and read from something and like 2/3 of you don't understand it. That probably is bad, actually. We should do some things about that. And that's why I'm happy to say that this church does have a lot of educational offerings. If you're interested in studying the Bible, we've got that. We've got Sunday school for our kids. And really, we should make a commitment to that. Make a commitment to learning more, because it is important that we know. But there is also something in preserving not having an absolute answer for everything, in allowing it to be a kernel of mystery. And that's going to be something that I want you to keep in mind. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Pharisees over the next couple weeks. I think it's important, maybe, if this is germane to who we are, that we know a little bit about what the heck is a Pharisee and what do they believe? What are they all about? Here's a shocking thing for you. We only barely know. Yeah, this is kind of interesting because if you are at all interested in looking back historically at some of the more ancient Greek philosophies or some of these early church movements or Christian movements or these other religions, you might be shocked as a layperson to know that we don't often know all that much about these groups and what they believe. They didn't leave us that big of a record. In fact, the Bible is a kind of, the New Testament anyway, is a kind of unique document in that it's a manifesto about belief that's very uncommon to the era. Most of these groups didn't feel like they needed to write a manifesto or lay down everything that they believed in one spot. It was self-evident that they believed those things, and everyone was talking and everyone agreed. So to have any sort of knowledge about what they believed and what a lot of these groups believed, what we have to actually find is people who have written against them. They're detractors. And then we extrapolate based on what so-and-so said is wrong with that philosophy, religion, cult, whatever, as a way of figuring out what they actually believed. And the Pharisees are no different. In fact, the person who is the most critical of the Pharisees is Jesus. So we have to go to Jesus and look at what he's saying, for instance, this week and say, wait a minute, so what are the Pharisees all about? Okay, here's our best guess. Our best guess about what the Pharisaical system was about maintaining the letter of the law. And this is the law as is interpreted through a lot of Old Testament stuff. It's sometimes known as the law of Moses. It's vast. It's a big chunk. And the Pharisees are reacting against a long tradition that had preceded this, where interpretation of that law had become so wide and so fuzzy that it was very difficult to find two Jews who agreed on how to keep the law. And some Jews were saying, it's really important that we determine the spirit of these things, that we follow this set, and other people were disagreeing. And in the meantime, catastrophe. The kingdom fractured in two, they had occupiers, there was just a lot of fractiousness. And so the Pharisees said, all right, listen, we have to have 100% adherence to 100% of the law, and it doesn't matter how goofy some of these things sound, you just have to do them. And stop thinking so much about it. Just do it. I don't want to hear any more talking, just do the law. Shh. Okay. And that meant sometimes that they did things that seem antithetical to us in our position now. But you can kind of understand where they're coming from. So the other place in human history where this is easiest to liken to is China. And I don't know if you ever remember your history class where they talked about Confucianism. So Confucianism is the state religion of China for a lot of its history. And the main point of Confucianism and the way that this kind of melds together is this idea of the mandate of heaven. So the mandate of heaven is the right to be in charge. And it goes to the emperor, and it cascades down in authority to everybody who would have power. So if you were a father of a family, you also had this mandate. If you were the provincial governor, you had this mandate. No matter what it was the right to be in charge, and you can lose it, right? You can lose it by not behaving in accordance with Confucian values, by not doing the right things. And the result of what happens there is an upheaval. So wives become in charge of their families, and rebels become in charge of the government. And while to us, I think as Westerners, we hear that and we say, good, let's get a little mix and match. Let's see if somebody else might do a better job. The Chinese react to their, as all histories do, they react to their traumas. And the story of China's deepest trauma is the trauma of revolt, of a country that did not have it put together. And they remember how bloody that period was. And so this becomes an important part of their philosophy. The same way for the Pharisees are remembering their trauma, the trauma of having been hurt by empires, and are reacting in this way. Okay, so that's my best belief about what Pharisees believe. You say to me, you come up to me and you say, Pastor Jim, I'm sick of being a Lutheran. I'm done being a Lutheran. I want to become a Pharisee. What do I do? And I say to myself, oh, geez. Well, the first thing you don't do is I cannot send you down to my friend Rabbi Michael at Temple Sinai. It is important for us to note that being a Pharisee is not the same thing as being a Jew. And that is an anti-Semitic misconception that has plagued the church forever. When Jesus speaks out against the Pharisees, he is speaking out against some people who are Jewish but who are Pharisees. And it's the Pharisee thing he's got the problem with, not the Jewishness part. I've said it before and I'll say it again, Jesus is Jewish. He is speaking to a Jewish audience. So you can't actually find a place to go worship as a Pharisee anymore. I'm sorry to say, if this is intriguing to you, if this delineation of Pharisaical beliefs is attractive, there is no place to go, because what happens after the fall of the Second Temple, which Jesus predicts when he says that no stone will be left on stone where he sees the temple, is that Christianity gets its start, but so does what's called Rabbinical Judaism. And Rabbinical Judaism is what Michael Schwartz down there at Temple Sinai is a part of. And they have a history, and they have a reaction to how they're going to do this community thing that's way different from what the Pharisees were doing. In fact, where the Pharisees said, don't think about it, stop using your brain, that becomes the absolute core of Rabbinic Judaism. It becomes a place of learning. There is a reason why if you go look at the Nobel list and you see how many Jews are represented there, it's because learning has become a critical part, and teaching, and this pursuit of knowledge and language. And it's to be applauded. It's amazing. And I think that that's something that you can look at and say, we Christians could take a little bit of inspiration from that, again, and return to our studies. So what would you find, though, if you did manage to find a Pharisaical place? One of the things that would probably shock you is no women anywhere. There's no place for women in the Pharisaical system. There is men, and there are men in authority, and there are men in charge of families, but really women aren't even second-class citizens. whatever the salvation schema is just doesn't even involve them. I've got an issue with that, regardless to say. You would probably be shocked at how much of the name Shekinah is used, which this is God's presence. Basically, the entire Pharisaical system is built around protecting and making sure that we don't lose God's presence among us. That's the key thing about who gets included and not included. If anybody does anything ritually unclean, out, get out. So you would find that where the church is a place for sinners, the church is a place for people who are doing mess-ups, the Pharisaical system is a place that makes sure those people have nothing to do with church. Get them as far away as possible. There's a danger they might contaminate our time together and make it so God doesn't show up. That's very critical to them, and very much something Jesus has a different opinion about, shall we say. You'd be shocked how much money was talked about in the Pharisaical system, and you'd also probably be shocked at just how many animals are dying in your worship service. I can proudly say that no single animal has ever died here at Clifton Lutheran Church, and that is a hallmark of my time here. And that could not be said if this was a Pharisaical place of worship. Lots of sacrifice. Now, did they spend a lot of time saying, why are we doing this sacrifice? No, it's just the Bible says, do it. Don't think about it. Make sure you're doing those. What would happen if God doesn't show up if we don't do it? Anyway, that is what Jesus is reacting against. You can see that it's insular. You can see that it's scared. It's a reaction against a lot of historical traumas and a lot of places where it's just best to turn off your head and to not think about stuff. But it's a mistake. It's not a system we seek to emulate at all. I maintain that it's a fundamentalism of sorts. And when we really get down to what it is we do together, the most worthwhile stuff betrays and just can't be solved by simple answers. So this week, in fact, actually at the end of this week, I have a phone call with Ross Dobson, right? And he says, they've got a donor for me. And I go into surgery at 3 p.m. today. That was yesterday. I'm going to tell you guys all right now, Ross is in the ICU right now recovering from his transplant. So I know. But this conversation that he has with me is complicated. He says, it's not a living donor. I don't know how I'm supposed to feel, and I don't know what I'm supposed to pray about, knowing that I hope to get this donation means that I'm praying for someone to die. And I've got a fine MELD score, like I'm a good candidate for this donation, but there's people who have better ones. There's probably people on the donation list who are younger than me. How am I supposed to feel about taking this liver? How am I supposed to feel about this complicated set of emotional and ethical and medical conundrums all tied together? Yeah, I don't have an easy answer. And I challenge anyone to give him a rote, simple response to that. The most worthwhile questions are the ones that are the most complicated. And there's a reason why we leave room in the church for mystery, for not knowing all the answers and not being able to give a simple answer to everything. There's a reason why we are a church that's Jesus-centered, meaning we're sent out into the world. The way our reading in Philippians says, the whole point of Jesus is that he comes. He arrives to us, doesn't stay up in heaven. He could have done that. But if we're going to pattern our lives after Jesus, we're going to have to be a church sent. I'm happy we're doing this fall festival, for instance. This is a place where we gather a lot of funds to send to Haiti. And that's complicated. Haiti is a complicated country. It's not easy just to say, well, here's how you fix Haiti. But I do know one thing, is that Mission of Hope International and the work they do in one spot makes a difference for those people. And the rest of it is complicated, but as a Christian, I'm committed. And I'm going to let God be in charge of mystery and figuring out how it's all going to come to its fruition. So, in conclusion, with the Pharisees, I guess to a certain extent, they are a little like us. But when it counts, when it really gets down to what matters the most in our time together, no, we're not like them at all. Because we are founded instead on being made known. Everything we do centers around being made known. When we go out into the world and do acts of justice like we will do here, it is known to the world that God's redemptive plan is at work, and it's for all people. When we gather together and we share in this fellowship that we have with one another, when we have these friendships, then it is made known to you that somebody cares about you and that God cares about you and loves you. When we share the sacrament, when we break bread and drink wine, then it is made known to you that Jesus, through his sacrifice, has paid the price for your salvation, and that you might know peace. So I guess knowledge is at the heart of it for us too. And for that we say, thanks be to God.